Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode.
And we will discuss about metaverse business strategy. Already you know that metaverse become very popular, especially the startup and the youth community. They want to work more on this metaverse. There are some misconception about metaverse. Our expert panel is going to discuss about metaverse business strategy. Maybe it will be helpful for emerging economy. First, I would like to give chance to Mr. Eric.
So we're talking about metaversal business, and one nice thing is you can think about business just like it always has been. It's just business, just makes some things a lot better, and that's probably where we should start, by figuring out how to do what we already do and make it better. However, there are things you can do in the metaverse that you can't do in regular business, and there's things that we even haven't thought of. So a business strategy should take into account what you could do. So if we look at what the metaverse is great at, it's really great about connecting communities and about bringing worlds in that are simulated or augmented. So we could take the world, make it a little more precise, make it a little better, give us some information, or we can go take things that you can't do. So example, one thing that's great is technical learning. You know, it's very hard to get a bunch of people and go to a place and fight a fire. It's very hard to give you time to actually fly a real Boeing aircraft. It's really hard sometimes to practice appearing on stage in front of 10,000 people. If you've never done that before, by the way, it's kind of a shock. So for those kind of things, you can save tons of time and money by simulating things that don't even that are very difficult to duplicate, and that includes in terms of testing. So concept of digital twins is when you deliver systems, you create the whole systems digitally, so it responds just like it would respond in real life. And then you actually integrate it with things, you test it with things, and that gives you a chance to work on things that you haven't worked on before. When it comes to connecting people, right now, things like loyalty programs, customer, is really based on this idea of experience. So you can do all kinds of new experiences. You can gamify things. You can connect things that weren't connected before. So you make going into a store and buying something a lot more fun, or it reminds you to buy stuff in more fun ways, or it connects one product with another product. If you own a coffee store and somebody else owns a bakery, wouldn't it be fun to connect the two and have these virtual experiences for things like that? But probably, if you're doing strategic business for the metaverse right now in the future, probably the biggest commodity besides that technical training is really based on community building. The metaverse is a place where people can connect with common interests or common values and work together. So the biggest currency that I've seen in the metaverse right now is sharing to work together. For example, with Victoria, Jason, or Extra, maybe we want to work on something, but I'm very interested in what Jason and Victoria and Extra want because I can help them get it. And the metaverse gives me all kinds of tools to help them get things faster. I mean, probably the biggest thing that surprised me in doing this is the speed at which things are happening. I think last week we talked about setting up a Center for Governance on Planet Ike and Alien Worlds. And I can't tell you how fast that's already going. How long does it take you to set this up? Maybe a week? I think we're taking 2 weeks because we really want to think at it and we're interviewing a lot of people. But the whole point, we could set up a whole center and populate it and have events already scheduled in a week. So I think if you're looking for ways to business strategy, think of the business not only in terms of money flowing, which is very important, but also with value flowing between a lot of people who work together to get stuff done. So that is a form of currency. So kind of in summary, what I would say, business strategy, look at what we're doing now. both in terms of retail common business, but also in terms of big industrial businesses and things like that. The second thing, look for what we can do next. And third thing, look at how we can use business strategy to connect different communities and help them get what they need. And there's value in that.
May I ask?
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll resist the temptation to do a whole business thesis on business strategy for the metaverse, but it is a whole sphere. So, like starting with like the idea of commerce, I think I would start.
You might
by
check
saying,
your mic, Jason.
Am I? Is my audio not good? Is it better if I speak closer, or how is this now? I can switch to headphones. Would that be better? Yeah. One sec. Using these, is the audio better? Yes? Okay. Sorry for that delay. I was going to say that business strategy refers to an understanding of what commercial activity is and what marketing activity is. Original marketing activity is understanding surplus in a location and moving that surplus to a location where there is deficit, and sort of moving from market to market, picking up whatever there's a surplus of, and strategically moving, traveling to the next place to deliver that inventory in a place where they really need that. And in a digital sense, those activities have transformed. The original idea of marketing strategy mostly talks about audience and attention, the economy of attention. If you look at any media business, they are fundamentally competing for attention with all of their programming and with all of their platform, whatever's there. And so I just wanted to see that thought and then introduce the idea that commerce and commercial activity is designed in its best form to bring people together, and that it's common mercy. And so strategically, it's important to know that driving a hard bargain with anybody is considered a behavior amongst enemies. It demonstrates that you don't care for the necessities of your counterparty, and that you only care for the price you can demand from them. So you drive a hard bargain and just sort of mindlessly charge the most you can get away with. And so that type of marketing activity is sort of the strategic imperative to view in terms of cultivating community. Putting forward good value propositions, putting forward the ability to bargain well is, I think, the fundamental strategy to achieve. And the metaverse is a whole sphere, right? There are different opportunities, very different opportunities available to the market of information products, the market of a thing like training. The metaverse is all about information. I'm sorry, my voice is a little raspy, but it's the ecosystem of ideas and information, and some of the highest valued companies in the world today are almost exclusively in the information industry. It will probably continue to be that way, that information is the most valuable thing. And what I'm hoping for strategically is a transformation in the bargaining of the pricing of information. And we'll see what happens with that, as more onboarding occurs, right? And so, thank you for that. I'll leave it at that for now and spare my voice.
Okay, I think
Okay, I think
extra. Mister, you want to add some point? I think you raise your hands.
Okay, I'm absolutely agree that we are currently talking about the economy of attention, and we vote for attention. I also want to add that if we are talking about metaverse business, we are talking about the next stage of cryptocurrency and blockchain business as well, because a lot of companies use metaverse as the some sort of new ICOs and for crowdfunding, and they usually use this version of business to be like new stage of ICO project and to crowdfund the money. But it is have some negative and positive bullets, and the negative issues is because we see a lot of scams, and some projects are not so good as they should be, and from the other side we see the rise of the hiring inside program developers, inside IT managers, PR managers, marketeers, and it is obviously boost economy all over the world, especially in innovation industries. It is mostly English-speaking business or some Asian market as well, and because as far as I know, Russian and Ukrainian usually do not use the language and get the geographical targeting inside Europe and Asian market as well. But it is both the economy. It helps to earn money to people. If we are talking about recession and inside possible recession on US market or UK or Europe or Russia or Ukraine, it is usually to help people to earn money and to move forward inside their country to other one, and it helps to the economy, because we see that a lot of layoffs from Twitter, from Facebook, Meta possibly fired some people, but these people could be useful for the metaverse business economy, and they could make a lot of new projects, and they help to the market to develop to move forward, and it is good for everybody. For example, we also see that metaverse also used, yes, like some trading process. As far as I know, Peter Diamandis use some virtual area to make some conferences inside this area, or to train the people, not only Zoom, but like some AR VR technology as well, and also a lot of people to get some training to train how to fly it, or how to program. We see some AR VR possibilities and metaverse possibilities for fashion brands as well, for product placement for brands as well. It will be the next stage of this economy, because when we get a lot of projects, and we could use metaverse projects as we use in publishers or media, we use the publishers, or brand use the publishers currently. So that is my options. Of course, we have a lot of startups who try to make metaverse, NFT, blockchain all together, and it helps to move forward for IT specialists and to make something new for the industries. For me, currently it is more about some maybe bubble, some blockchain stage or ICO stage, because usually we see as a communication agency or some trend watchers, we see that the projects that use fintech market or sport tech, HR tech, they usually get some results more efficiently, much efficiently than, for example, if we are see some people who make the metaverse for a real estate project, for example, because it's not it is always connected, and usually the most successful project connected with AR VR technologies, and that's why if we're talking about metaverse business, we are talking about the new geographical area and the new special audience who will be interested, or to whom they will be interested, to some from brands, fashion brands, reality brands, maybe fintech brands, because it's like small universes each time. And to get the audience, yes, we do understand how crypto kittens or monkey, you could just sell the NFTs, some NFTs, and we see like how NFT market connected with the art market currently. It is they move together, and we see that Miami Art Basel usually currently will have some corner for NFT projects as well. But if we're talking about metaverse, it will be some new projects, maybe, and it is will be connected mostly with the training, and or maybe with the new customer experience for brands. Thank you. If someone, I hope that everybody hear me well.
Thank you. World Talent Economy Forum, we are collaborating with petrobusiness.com. Victoria actually launched this startup, and we are supporting this project because in emerging economy we have a huge demand for this kind of tech and tech innovations and digitalizations and this kind of thing. So thank you, Victoria, for supporting these Asian communities. So hopefully we can build up a successful collaborations in between the industries and your organizations. Thank you for your presentation. Now I request our friend Mr. Extra your name.
That is my name.
Okay, excellent. So what you want to share is about metaverse, especially the business strategy. Yeah.
I'd like to go back to what Jason was talking about for a moment.
Okay.
Because I wasn't really clear. I know Jason and I are on several calls together. We've gotten to know each other somewhat well. When we don't necessarily see eye to eye on certain things, as I'm sure he would acknowledge.
Okay, I think Professor David Smith has a presentation. It will help you to understand today's sessions. Professor David Smith, I want to give chance to give the presentation.
Sharif, thank you so very much. You know, the metaverse, as many have said, is an emerging strategy. And particularly when you look at how it is beginning to blend together multiple elements. And no matter how the metaverse evolves, its key concepts tend to be business relevant today. And yes, there's a lot of entertainment activities in it. But when you look at commerce, when you look at how the metaverse can be used in governance, how you look at it can be in a regulatory environment, how it can be used between NGOs and others, it really takes you back to some of the business concepts. And a metaverse internet is an interconnected reality that will provide a mixed reality 3D digital world where you can buy, sell real goods and services, sign, enforce contracts, recruit and
train employees, look at different elements like that. You can interact with customers. You can interact with communities. You can interact with voters. You can interact with stakeholders. And you see some of them. So some of the near term things that businesses have to do, entrepreneurs have to do, governments have to do, academic institutions have to do, is really become metaverse savvy. Get familiar with the concepts and begin to play with it, test them, get in groups, create a group as a metaverse source of knowledge and skills. And one of the important things that you need to do with that as a company or a government body is involve the range of generations. There are 6 generations in the workforce today at the same time, a unique occurrence that we have not really had many times in the past history. You have to involve each of the generations because each of the generations will perceive and interact with parts of the metaverse very differently. And so that's an important consideration as you begin to become savvy with it. Then you need to develop a strategy. Look at what are your near-term objectives, your close term, what are your longer-term opportunities. There's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunities. And one of the key elements of the metaverse, as opposed to a brick and mortar facility, is the metaverse is globally at launch. And so you have to think globally and not just locally as you work to develop your metaverse strategy and strategy there. And determine plans for security, for privacy, for identity. How do you publish applications? Which platforms do you put it on? How many other platforms do you want to interconnect with it? Are they separate versions or are they linked versions? How are you looking at the APIs to your existing core business systems, your existing core governance systems, so that you can connect? How do you connect your legacy applications you have today to your future meta applications? Real important before you begin to do that, because what we saw with early applications of programs similar to this, like Second Life, where companies rushed to create islands in Second Life, they were disconnected and they were not sustainable. So you need to look at those. Then begin to develop test cases. We've heard the term in your program, Sharif, many times of digital twins. You need to look at different scenarios with using a digital twin approach to do the risk case. And you need to look at low risk and high risk as you're doing this. So look at such as selling digital versions of physical goods, virtual tours, voting, how are you going to use it for marketing? And then you have to go to those long-term considerations. One of the stumbling blocks, if we do not get it correct, and it's just like we've heard Jason say many times, extra kind of referred to, there is still not consensus on how we're going to do security, how we're going to do for privacy, how we're going to do banking and commerce. How is it going to connect to the various systems we have today? Victoria talked about how it will be crypto based. I am not sure you're going to see most of the metaverse in the near term be crypto based. It's going to go into many places, into other commerce services that are non-crypto based in the near term. And I think you will see a hybrid of that long term. If I am looking at ways to move large, particularly existing global companies and large retail companies onto the metaverse, it's not going to be 100% crypto based, because that is the death to most business strategies today, particularly when you see the fallout from cryptocurrency lately. So you have to begin to focus on those trust elements. And how do you look at cybersecurity, privacy, regulatory compliance, banking compliance, anti-fraud efforts? How can I go and deal with the multitude of international laws? If I look at the privacy laws in Singapore versus the EU versus state by state in the United States. The new ones we're seeing that just were introduced this week in UK, it's going to be a compliance nightmare. It's going to be in traditional e-commerce, and those traditional e-commerce challenges are going to be because the metaverse is just an e-commerce when you look at that. Rethink your ways to try to use different types of data science to authenticate identity, to authenticate assets, to authenticate transactions and contacts, because those are going to push us. Rethink core competencies. What are the people you need? What are the business relationships? What are your contractors? What are your consultancies? Do you own your metaverse platform? Are you using other people's? Are you using a metaverse type as a service approach? And then how do you align your physical services and the assets you have in your portfolio to the new metaverse, digital ones? And you need to drive for a consistent and seamless brand identity between the physical world and the digital world. And if I'm looking at my 6 simple steps to look at metaverse business strategy, these are those. And the word simple is an oxymoron here, because the metaverse is going to be complex. The compliance in the metaverse is going to be complex. Dealing with your legacy systems versus the new systems that the metaverse is going to require is going to be complex. But you've got to start with the first steps here, or you're doomed for failure. And again, I think just as you look at this, and I think PwC did really fantastic job of trying to look at these as you look at the systems and how you reflect and how the environment becomes hyper connected. Those are some of the steps you have to consider as you look at a business strategy. And Sharif, that's, I think, a quick view of some of the steps in a nutshell. So Sharif, I'll let you have it back. And you're muted.
Thank you. Mr. Extra. So you want to add any point after this presentation? Do you want to add any point? You have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute, please?
I'm sorry. I had a question that kind of relates back to what both Eric and Jason were saying about kind of this lack of demographics or targeted customer base. That it seemed like, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'd like them both to clarify if they're open to it. That there seemed to be kind of a almost a overly general approach instead of a specific approach. And like I said, maybe I'm misconstruing their what their comments were, but certainly like related to what Jason said, and maybe he can respond, is this overgeneralization, if you will. So am I wrong, Jason? Like am I like I said, am I misinterpreting what your comments were? And maybe and I thought that Eric kind of reinforced that, which was that there wasn't a specificity.
Well, strategy is about generalizations, and the metaverse that was just an introduction. But a fair point. I mean, it has to relate to a specific method, and that it's real. But so far, I don't know where your logic is. And misinterpretation is not the same as being misconstrued. Misconstrued is a little more malicious than that. If you don't understand like what I mean, I can try to clarify. I'm just trying to say that to cultivate community, bargaining and the method of bargaining is what I would look at strategically. And price discovery is an important aspect. And we're working in information products and information, like we put forward an idea of ourselves in the ecosystem of ideas. We are including ourselves in the metaverse by creating sort of a visualized user interface for information to be shared and exchanged, and for price discovery, for such things to occur.
Well, I didn't mean misconstrued as in a nefarious way, you know.
Well, to construe a thing is to like twist words and use like a logic crowd. Misconstrue is not the same as misinterpret. Misinterpret is like, oh, I made a mistake. I didn't catch it quite right. Misconstrue means, yeah, I understood it, twist it. Like our political culture is.
I think you're getting into a semantic argument.
I know. Sorry for the semantics. It's just that.
I wasn't trying to make a semantic argument. I was trying to make a more general discussion about how the metaverse is applied or marketed to a degree, right? And like I said, I think the point is that there was a lot of generalization in your and Eric's comments about how demographics and distinction in those demographics might be more advantageous, if you will. But again, I find this call to be somewhat semantic attractive than to discuss where we are going generally.
Okay, I apologize if I touched on a nerve, but where I was going, maybe if there's a demographic to identify, it would be the elasticity of demand, in that certain information has very rigid elasticity of demand, which means that the information is necessary information, or a platform is necessary platform access. And that in a way, a platform or an information piece can have an infinite price or an infinite value. And at the same time, there's less elasticity. There's certain information pieces that are really more of a luxury, that are perfectly elastic. That, you know, if the price is too high, everybody would just refuse to consume that. And so the demographic I would look at is that elasticity. And I actually wanted, I feel like staying generalized for strategic reasons is still correct.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, you want to add any points?
Try to take this into their own thing, right? I'm not trying to be prescriptive for other people.
Maybe I add something that if we're talking about demographics, we should understand that I absolutely agree with the Professor Smith that it is not only crypto marketing, metaverse not only connected with crypto audience, cryptocurrency, but we should understand that and admit that all classic business are too conservative to implement new technology, at least in Europe or in Russia. If we're talking about demographic of these businesses, we are talking about primarily US market and Asian market, and Europe as well. But for example, Italy, not a digitalized country at all, but it is a European country. So it is mostly Generation Z. So young adults and some IT industry specialists. It is also the first level of the audience. of these startups, if we're talking. Yes, we are awaiting for the implementation of Metaverse inside some classical businesses, but we should expect on use these services inside some military service during training. And after that, maybe some classical brands will be used. Because if we're talking, for example, about reality business or development, some banking business, they do not need to use them because currently it is not worldwide service at all. It is used by game dev specialists, first of all, and it as it was with cryptocurrency and blockchain, it's used by some geeks, first of all. And after that, we could use it and expect to the next level of the technology used by some social medias, and after that some classical businesses as well. It is good that currently we see that all the path to implement new technology, just it is rather shortened than it was a couple of years ago before COVID. After COVID, every country tried to use all the digital technology much faster, and the industry implemented or tried to looking at the market more attentive than it was before.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Well, you know, talk about strategic versus specific. We're talking about the metaverse, not the metaverse for a specific group. I mean, that's like saying, let's talk about Web 3.0. Who's that for? Let's get specific about Web 3.0. You can't really do it. While you can use specific use cases, and we should get lots of specific use cases, but the general discussion is strategy for metaversal businesses, basically. And so something that we need to keep in mind, because for every demographic that Extra and Victoria talked about, we're going to have to worry about politics. Right now, there's a big pushback in the U.S. for politics over cryptocurrency and tokens. So, you know, every government is going to feel threatened. Every financial institute is going to feel threatened. And then eventually some businesses are going to feel threatened too, when all of a sudden they're not able to keep a lock on their market all to themselves. You know, and people start wanting Facebook or Meta to integrate with Google, they were going to start having some problems because they don't want to do that. It's in their best interest for Amazon and companies like that to keep the world all to themselves, and the metaverse is not that kind of technology. So politics is a big political factor. The other thing is economies. As economies change, huge factors there, especially, again, with the banking and affordability. Right now, there are people making money on the metaverse in areas where a little money makes a huge difference, and they're able to do some of that in developing countries. So economies, depending on where you are, that makes a big difference too. Social, cultural, you know, there's going to be a big, right now there's mostly lack of understanding what the metaverse is, even by people that spend a lot of their time playing with the metaverse. So the general public and the consumers, you know, if you look at Gartner's hype curve, at some point they're going to go, this is the greatest thing spread. This is wonderful. It's going to solve all our problems. And when it doesn't, they're going to be disillusioned and say, oh, it was just a scam. It doesn't work. We follow patterns. So all that has to be put in with strategy, as well as today the environment. And the big thing, again, is legal. We don't know how to manage this. We don't have use cases. We don't have laws. And so all those are going to change with any demographic that we try and solve problems for, or that want to adopt the metaverse. So that's a big key, is those inputs. But what is strategy in general? Strategy is something that people normally use to achieve competitive advantage. Competitive doesn't have to be dollars. It could be awareness. It could be market share. It could be anything. But when you're talking about competitiveness, it's really about how you take resources and capabilities, put them into activities, which create that advantage, which shapes then what resources you want to develop and acquire and what capabilities you want to be able to do. So when you're looking at that, what are the resources that the metaverse gives us? It gives us the metaverse one of the things is decentralized organizations. So, resources means that, one of our friends is working on a decentralized autonomous movie studios where people work on movies together and videos and media together. I mean, that's a capability. That's a capability that's in there, and the resources to provide that. So he took these resources and said, let's make a capability. There's also the AR, VR. So there's enhanced, extended. There's all these things you could do with those capabilities. There's also the ability for record keeping with blockchain and public and access, the way we access data, the way we move value, whether capture that and move that around. So I think Victoria talked about some really good resources that are available, and then the capability. I think David really hit the nail on the head when we talked about, well, what can you do with all this stuff? I mean, great resources are continue to be developed. What are the capabilities? So regardless of who we're talking about, something they have in common is what are the resources, what are the capabilities, how do we put those into activities, and how do we turn that into competitive advantage? And David also talked about governance, and that's one of my passions. So I'm working with how do you motivate and coordinate volunteers by using fractal-based consensus using the metaverse. So here's this new tools, this fractal governance. Here's some capabilities that we have, mainly because of people in development and the ability to integrate those pieces. And we've got activity planning to put together to actually change the way, remove dysfunction from organizations doing that. So I think with that base, we can take any use case and run it down and say, okay, here's how those capabilities, resources, and activities change for this group. Here's how they change for that group. And of course, with resource and capabilities always changing, that is a disruptive and highly volatile market. So that was a long way for me to say what I think about starting strategically or generic, and how do you drill down to the specific. I think they're both important.
Thank you. Professor David Smith.
Eric and Jason and Victoria and Extra, all the comments have been very good. The metaverse is going to be different, but the metaverse is going to be the same. The demographics for the metaverse, you're going to see a diversity there as well. You're going to see not only an age difference diversity. And as I look at the difference between a baby boomer to a Z Gen to others, the way they perceive and interact with the metaverse is going to be different. As I begin to look at cultural roles, the cultural roles are going to be very different. The metaverse is going to be perceived different in China than it is going to be in UAE, than it is going to be in Australia, and the differences you begin to see there. The way the metaverse is marketed is going to have to become a multifold marketing view because of the difference in the demographics that have been talked about here. My biggest inhibitor I see in going forward the metaverse is the lack of consistent standards. There's individual groups working on standards, but you don't see these standards being adopted yet by international standards organizations. And I think you've got to begin to move the metaverse from a set of regional standards or ad hoc standards with groups who have embedded special interests to where you have more global standards. I love the group that Jason's working with, maybe Extra's working with some of the others, of making some of the initial steps. It really does have to move up into global standard bodies for the metaverse to become the next generation digital platform. And if the goal for the metaverse is to be a next generation digital platform, it has to get there. The regulatory compliance, particularly the legal compliance, because the metaverse is all about making legal contracts underneath it. That's how you monetize. And that legal framework for the metaverse, particularly in a global commerce, where I want to move money from Singapore to Ukraine to Brazil back to the United States, that part has to be still put together in a set of standards and a set of legal doctrine that will let that happen. So those are some of the next steps that really have to happen as you look at the business strategy to move the metaverse from where it is as a next generation playground today, a next generation test bed for looking at business concepts, into a solid global e-commerce enabled platform. So that's my thoughts, Sharif.
Thank you.
I would just like to
what's
have
your-
one comment on that, which David, as usual, is right on. But the thing about standard is you don't have to have one standard adopted by everybody. Just as long as you get groups of people using standards, there's often possible to bridge. You know, we don't need everybody using JPEG. There's lots of image standards that can. So as long as we figure out bridges, as long as people are creating standards and bridges, then eventually people will like one and it will take over and dominate. So a lot of people, I hear this a lot, say, oh, we have to make, the focus is on making a standard. No, we have to agree to work together to make things among some group to work together. Some standards will evolve, then we'll start bridging standards, and eventually they come up with more standard is often the way that works. Occasionally somebody sits through things ahead of time and comes up with a standard first and then implements it, but I've seen a lot more success the other way.
Well, they always start that way,
Can I
Eric.
add?
But
Can I
that's
add
where
something to
you
that
have
real
to
quick,
go.
Eric? Eric, may I add something to that just for a moment? I think
Sure.
the notion that you're describing, and that what David is getting at, is if you're using it across different platforms. If you're using it within the same platform or the same blockchain or whatever it is, then you don't need to have those bridges. Right? What you're describing is, I think what David's getting at is commonality of functionality across different platforms. So, for example, if you look at what JP Morgan did with what originally was IIP, right, is that everybody just accepted they were going to use JP Morgan standard. And that was a chain, essentially, for lack of a better word, they were going to use. And within that ecosystem, you didn't have to have bridges because everybody's accepted that's what you're going to use, right? The same thing that if you can make the analogy to blockchain or, to Bitcoin, right? That if you're just going to do P2P within blockchain, within Bitcoin and not use Litecoin or not use Ethereum or anything else, then you can always use it within that paradigm, let's call it, right? So if you're within the same paradigm and everybody agrees upon that paradigm, and I'm not saying that's the best way of doing it, but the notion of bridges says that you're moving it across different platforms. So if you're doing ACH, for example, just to go back to like the traditional banking model, everybody, and by everybody I mean the banks, will accept ACH, then you don't need bridges. You don't need other realities. You don't need other functionalities. right? So, and I'm not saying that's the best solution because I know it's not, and it's and NAC it's not the best solution. But I guess my point would be that you're building a paradigm on an assumption that everybody's not already using the same thing. And whether that same thing is great or terrible is another conversation. But I think that needs to be. I mean that primary assumption needs to be examined.
Well, so again, as usual, I'm not really disagreeing with David at all. The standards is bodies. The real conversation is how can we work together better, and that is a conversation as other people have. But I'm just saying development tends to run ahead of that a lot of the time, and so my only point was the fact that we don't have all these standards doesn't prevent a lot of good stuff from happening. It would be great if we could get together and get the buy-in for people to have those standards today. But one of the problems is when you don't understand, there's not an agreement of what this is, and it's often difficult to have those conversations. So my point was only that, yes, as we get more and more standards and have those discussions and have standards bodies that do that, that makes it more and more interoperable and better for everybody. That being said, I just wanted to say we don't have to wait for that to happen for some good things to happen, on the way there.
And I guess, Eric, my point was that you're basing a assumption on that there isn't one good standard. That if there was one good standard, you wouldn't be having those arguments because everybody would be only using the only good standard.
It's tough to have one good standard when there's so many people working on this stuff independently at breakneck speed all over the place. So, have we all agreed that we're all using Ethereum? Oh no, we're not. Have we got one cryptocurrency standard? Oh no, we're not. Have we got a blockchain standard? Oh, we're not. Do we have a wallet standard? Oh gosh, what do you know? We don't. Do we have a standard for writing interfaces and things like? Do we have the WordPress equivalent for the metaverse or blockchain? Oh, no, we don't. So yeah, in a dealing with there may be a good standard everybody's using for things like TCP/IP, sure, HTTP, sure. So there are standards that everybody's using, but when it comes to this new capability, even with VR, AR, computer intelligence, no. We're not all using Hadoop. We're not using things. I see new things coming every day, and it's not that they aren't good, but we now all of a sudden people, you made a blockchain and you made a wallet to talk to that blockchain, and all of a sudden Anchor comes along and here's things that bridge these different standards, so you can still start moving things from Wax to Bennett to Ethereum. Yeah, there are ways to do that. There are different standards. Would it be great if we had a standard that we kind of all agreed on? That sure. Would it be great if there was a standard bodies coming up with this stuff? Yeah, even better. But it's tough to get a standard body. They start when a bunch of people realize the need, kind of start thinking about it somewhat the same way, and start having these conversations about how can we be more interoperable. And some of that's starting to happen, and some of the big organizations are going to do some of that first because they see the value to do that. But I'm sure Meta would like to have its own standard on how you do the metaverse, and I'm sure Amazon would like to have its own. But we know no one's going to go along with that, at least not for long, because consumers are eventually going to say, why are you making it difficult when other people are making it easy?
But Eric, one of the places you have to set standards around is commerce. And I agree, on the creative side, we can have all these standards. It's like when I helped drive the standards in the semiconductor industry. You know, if every CPU had different numbers of chips of connection points to the motherboard, and every one of the pins were not standardized, we would have a hell of a time putting together computer systems to run the metaverse on. If I did not have standards for graphics, the metaverse wouldn't exist, and things like that. So there are places where the individuality helps. I mean, when I look at the next generation of computer chips, and we see now that nanomorphic computing is beginning to approach the power of quantum computing, it's doing that without understanding the nanomorphic standards that are going to have to exist as it goes there. Just like we are now seeing global standards for quantum computing for cybersecurity. We're seeing global standards for quantum computing for interfaces into systems. So that's my point, is as we begin to move this from, gee, this is really neat technology and something that can be globalized, begin to do some of these things, and particularly on commerce and the regulatory environment.
As usual, I don't disagree with you at all. I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just saying, yeah, it'd be nice if the world worked that way, and as it does, that's when things forget the really accelerated growth and full adoption. Standards are critical, but we're going to see some growth in different areas before people start seeing the pain enough to drive them to come together and have those discussions. So when we're talking about strategy, I'm just saying the strategy has to take into account that, yes, hopefully we'll get to the standards. What do we do in the meantime? So when you're talking about capabilities and resources, standards improve your capabilities, and standards are a resource. But until then, your strategy still has to go on that cycle and say, what do we have today that we'll work with? And it turns out, oh yeah, there are things we can work with, but it'd be in all our best interest to, not be on metric and English English measurement systems. That would be. Still don't know why we aren't all on metric. I don't get it. My background is engineering, so obviously I'm a real fan of standards.
Thank you. Madam Victoria, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Sharif. Yes, I think if we are talking about standards, it's much better to talk about some qualities that we should achieve using some services or some apps. For example, we use different types of mobile phones currently, and we choose by our brand and by the quality. So how good it is in usage, the charge of the battery, etc. So we could, if we're talking about the metaverse or some new technologies that moving forward to with us or just arrive to our world, so we could use as a standard some quality. So if we, in the future, if we, for example, if we choose some crypto wallet, we choose by the quality of this service. So it doesn't matter how it is called, and if we're talking even about cryptocurrency, some of us use Bitcoin, but a lot of people use USDT, TRC, or BNB currency. So we USDT, like stable coins, because they much similar to US dollars, and that's why you don't connect it with the leverage of the currency of the Bitcoin, first of all, and or Ethereum. So and here we choose, our choice is motivated by the quality of the currency. And I think in the future we will use, if we will have a lot of universes, for example, let's imagine, and we will choose by the quality of each service. for sure. I'm not. Yes, I'm agree that mostly metaverses uses cryptocurrency, but maybe these business will achieve their path or their future starting from entertainment agencies. Entertainment industry. For example, I know this startup that use Metaverse for movie directing, and they plan to have some social media inside Metaverse universe, and to use them and provide them to the cinema um, actors or movie directors for civil journalism as well. So that's my conclusion. So our next, no matter will it be approved by political issues by the government somehow, metaverse will be no matter what in our future, and this business for sure. Even if cryptocurrency will have some future as .com industry had, we will have metaverse for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks?
Thank you again. I feel as though the standard setting is an area of healthy competition, and that standards used a certain way, the understanding of a standard is also just best in class. In that I wanted to refer to competitive behavior in a healthy way as opposed to anti-competitive behavior in a sort of like authoritarian understanding of standards. Like when a standard is sort of given as a rule and say this is how everybody has to do it, then that's different than achieving standards. Achieving standards, and that it is a maybe a mistake to think that disruption is good all the time. That people who are innovators and people who are developers are disruptive to other standards, right? They're setting new standards, and that's healthy competition. But it should only really break through at an infrequent interval when there's meaningful breakthrough. And I wanted to mention the importance of compatibility, and the importance of onboarding, and that the whole customer base, like all the client side and user points, everybody gets used to a certain method of and a certain expectation of what's in the user agreement and how to log in and stuff. And that in this case, it risks your network effect. It strategically risks your whole network effect if you have to teach your audience how the internet works from top to bottom before you have a customer. And it's not a viable method. In that strategically, it's imperative for anybody who's trying to put forward business for the metaverse or to build another aspect of metaverse, that they can depend on existing standards that their audience already knows, that their audience already understands, is already used to, fully expects, so you don't have to train them. And that you've maximized your compatibility, because you can only control your own project. Strategically, design your project for maximum compatibility, is what I would say. Like, understand what other standards are out there, what other best practices are out there, and like create the for them. Create the spaghetti code for them if you can, so that other people can use, so you can meet people where they're at, and people can use their whatever devices they've got to be part of your network. The concluding remark: strategically, the maximum size of your network effect is your main exponent.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks?
I think we focus on the emerging capabilities and resources and apply them to specific use cases. In doing that, the real key, I think, is kind of what David said, is focusing on the integration of transactions That's the legal part that's going to bind things together, which is still fuzzy. But as we get that under control, figure out for each transaction we want to do, how do we put that into creating these distributed autonomous capabilities? And again, as standards emerge, that's going to make that a lot more doable. And as they get widely adopted, then that's when we can supercharge the metaverse, because that's when you can get wide adoption and acceptance.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks?
Ditto. I mean, a lot of what has been said is so very true as we look at the emerging. I want to underscore the word emerging business strategies for the metaverse. As Jason said, there's a lot of experimentation still going on. You're seeing big companies, big brands begin to dip their toe in the water. But as I look at a business strategy, I have to look beyond the dot 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so what you're doing to get there. And I'm looking at when we see metaverse dot 1.1, where you see a metaverse that is being wider spread. You're seeing it begin to use as a view to do commerce, to do education, to do governance, to have the ability to use it as a platform for citizen government interactions, for business-centric, company-to-company, nation-to-nation interactions. It's important. Now, if we do not have disruptor of innovation, you wouldn't have a metaverse today, because the metaverse is a disruption from what was our traditional. You wouldn't have HTTP type of interfaces like we have today. We'd still be using Gopher to go back and find information across the internet. Oh, we wouldn't be having the internet. We would be having all these various private networks that don't interconnect. And each of those were disruptions as we move forward. But where they've reached the global scale that let us do what we're doing today with the World Talent Economic Forum, reaching your global audience, we have to move forward with things where we have interoperability. And I can see that where we're headed with the metaverse. I love playing in the different parts of the metaverse. You know, I have one company that I helped start, and I'm the CTO at, that we're betting on that the metaverse standards will come faster than later. Because yes, we can deploy that technology in islands of isolation, kind of like Jason talked about with the inventor's dilemmas there. But I want the mass market, because I would like that company to become a unicorn company, because I'm ready to buy that island in the Caribbean. But until we get some of those things, it's not going to be an island in the Caribbean. It might be a holiday in the Caribbean. So we need to see those differences as we get there. And Sharif, the programs like you do are helping us get there. Your programs are excellent for looking at where academia needs to go, to where entrepreneurs can begin to see and build off on. Governments need to understand that we're entering a new domain for governments, where governments can no longer be isolated and be effective in the global environment. And we're seeing that as individuals. You know, we're in a time, like I've spoken about for decades, of lifelong learning. And the next generation metaverse is an excellent tool for lifelong learning. And Sharif, programs like yours help reinforce all these principles as we look forward for all those elements across all those very diverse stakeholders. So thank you so much for doing programs like this. And that's my concluding remark.
Thank you, Professor David Smith, and all other speakers, Mr. Eric, Mr. Jason, and Victoria, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And we not only do these dialogues, we do a lot of research papers, publishing research. So those who are interested to publish research paper with us, you can communicate with us, because we have a very, very big conference, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference, next year, April. And 25,000 scientists from around the world, they are joining in this conference. Not only the scientists, government agencies, central bank, largest corporations, startup, everybody joining in this ecosystem. So I want to invite you all in our conference. Beside that, you know that as we are taking a lot of actions, we are developing the revised migrations. If you see the emerging economy, you can find uh, this is very, very important to decentralize the city. Most of the cases, the a specific city has lot of crowd, lot of people. So we are developing entrepreneur initiative, and you know Asia Pacific there are huge populations. So we will develop 15,000 entrepreneurs in 300 different cities. So those who are interested to join in our team, we are open for this kind of initiative. Uh, I can ensure it will be one of the largest revolution in Asia Pacific. Especially, we will develop the knowledge-oriented society. So thank you, Professor David Smith, Mr. Eric, Mr. Jason, Victoria, for your continuous support. We need more collaborations, more partnerships, more works. I want to invite you all in Dhaka. I'm sure how we progressing with the local social entrepreneurs. It's very interesting. From developed world, I want to invite you all in our projects. But definitely we need more support because now our project growing really big. So we need everyone contributions. Thank you everyone for joining today's session, especially the audience. Please share our content with your government agencies, with corporations and academy. Hopefully through this process we can make next World Economy Forum for emerging economy. Thank you everyone. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.